This is a Rogue Media Network podcast.
I'm Jay Mathis, and this is Your Playbook, where we break down the behaviors, attitudes, and techniques top performers use every day to achieve their version of success. I invite you to join me for every episode as I talk with my friends who are leaders from various industries and walks of life, learning about their playbook and what habits, mindsets, and strategies shape their business and personal life. Hey, welcome to Your Playbook. I'm Jay Mathis, and today is going to be a great day because I'm getting to talk to a friend of mine who I've known now for probably 30 plus years. We're tied together originally through our dads. And so I want to welcome Dina Dwyer-Owens. Dina, thank you so much for coming and sitting down with me.
Happy to be here.
And talking. It is a lot of fun. We have seen each other in business settings through the eyes of our fathers when they were friends back in the 80s. And then to just did some business together ourselves. But what fun it is to talk about we use the word playbook, and you have a playbook, whether you have a physical one or not, we all do. And we'll talk about that. But I want you to give us, because I know a lot of things, but like the story of Dina Dwyer-Owens going back, however you want to go, and tie it in, because your life has been tied in with the Dwyer Group. So closely, right? I mean, from when you were young all the way until now. So give us just a little overview if you could.
Yeah, sure. So I'm one of 6 kids and just blessed by a wonderful mother and father. We were raised, you might remember Success Motivation Institute, which is still around,
right.
but came to Waco, Texas in the first place because my father was involved in SMI. And so at a very early age, we were taught to think positive. Yep. We were listening to the Success Motivation Institute cassette tapes.
You listen to Paul Meyer back in the 70s.
Yeah. Back in the 70s. And it's funny that even at the age of, I don't know, maybe 10 or 11, I remember being paid an allowance. If I would listen to the cassette 6 times, it's at repetitions of mother of skill.
Oh, yes.
So listen 6 times, you get a bonus allowance. And I thought, I need the bonus allowance, so I'm going to listen 6 times. And then my father would test us by asking a few questions just to see if we had really listened. But he was brilliant in that he was planting seeds into our minds at a very early age, along with like the affirmation stickers that were on our mirrors at home. Happiness is a habit. Today is the happiest day of my life. I'm God's greatest miracle. So every day as a kid waking up, I wasn't looking at social media and whatever
came
good
across.
Or bad,
yep.
I might be reading about somebody else. I was looking in the mirror and reading that I'm one of God's greatest miracles. And that just brilliant. So
yes,
that could be a very long story.
Was that from your dad, mom, both, or did one drive that more than the other?
My father drove the positive mental attitude. My mother drove our devotion to our Lord.
Okay, the nurturing, that deep.
Yes, going to church, making sure that we understood the Bible. That was my mother's role. Not that my father didn't go to church with us as well, but he focused on raising us to be hardworking, ethical citizens, and patriotic citizens. And she really worked on us making sure that we remember God's number one. Yeah. So raised again with amazing brothers and sisters. We moved to Waco from California in a very, very large school, large neighborhood to a dirt road in Bosqueville, Texas. And I think my class had 12 people in it when I came for 4th grade.
Wow.
So very, very different. And my father, I'll never forget the story. My mother said, who are the kids going to play with, right? We're in the middle of nowhere. Yeah. And he said, they're going to become best friends.
The kids are going to become
best friends. So to today, we all live in the Waco and surrounding area, Jay. Not that some haven't moved off and tried other places, but being home by family is what matters the most. So they've come home. Anyways, cool. Raised to work hard, to work at the age of 12. And my father had a car wash. Your dad would remember this.
Oh, I went to that car wash. At the end of Valley, he had the one at the end of Valley Mills Drive.
That's right. Mission Car Wash.
Yeah, Mission Car Wash.
Cobb's and Valley Mills.
Yep.
And we were put to work there at an early age. And then he had some restaurants, fast food restaurants. So we all worked at the restaurants. And, like any teenager, it's like, oh, you're kidding. I've got to get up on a Saturday morning and go to work. But looking back, I'm so grateful because he really did teach us so many wonderful lessons about how hard work, you feel good when you put in a good day's work.
Oh, yeah.
You still have plenty of time to play. So he brought me into the business. I did go to Baylor. I went there for about 2.5 years because I was working full time for him about 30 hours a week.
Okay.
Kind of frustrating, actually, because I like to have fun. It's like, I just wasn't having fun.
You were going to school and working.
And working 30 hours a week. So I'm like, Dad, something's got to give. He said, well, why don't you just take a semester off, get your real estate license, because he was very involved in real estate. And then let's talk about it. Well, after working side by side with him and getting my real estate license, I learned so much.
Yeah.
Not that I don't believe in higher education, I do. And so I never finished a degree at Baylor. I did end up being invited to come back and teach at Baylor.
Teach at Baylor.
Yeah, teach about entrepreneurship and,
good.
values-based leadership.
Yep.
And I'm grateful for that opportunity. But I always continued to study those things that really mattered in the business world that I was part of.
Yeah.
So franchising is really that world. So he brought me into the franchising business at an early age.
And at that time, the franchising business for him, what was the first one? Was
Rainbow
it
International. Carpet dyeing and cleaning.
That's what it was called?
That's what it was called.
That's right. Yeah.
Yes.
And that was like mid to late 80s?
81.
81. Okay.
1980. He
81.
really founded what became the Dwyer Group in 1981 with one brand. Yeah.
Okay.
And then he acquired or started up additional brands, took the company public basically in 1993, died of a sudden heart attack at the age of 60 in 1994. So we were left with this publicly traded company on NASDAQ. But the visionary was no longer there.
Right.
So a lot of fear in the shareholders'
Yeah,
minds. What are we going to do here?
Yes.
But I was blessed to be given the opportunity after a few years of working as VP of operations under Robert Tunmeyer, who taught me so much.
Yep.
I was asked to be initially the acting president and CEO because they were afraid what the shareholders might say about putting a 35-year-old in charge of a publicly traded company.
Sure.
And honestly, I was honored, but I was afraid too. And I had some naysayers. That's a whole nother story. But really just had to pray to God that you would give me what I need to be able to do this job. And what I needed was to be surrounded by great people and to do what I did well, which is only a few things, but to make sure I had people around me who did all the other stuff really well and give them the chance to do it and then just inspect what I expected.
Do you think the reason it ended up being you as opposed to a non-family member or one of the other members, was there something about your skill set, your mindset that just fit that role the best? Like that CEO, like, do you think if your dad could have written the script, he would have even said, would have picked you? Like, what was it about you?
He did say to me many times, because I would be complaining about not making enough money for the amount of work I was doing. I was managing 28 people and making $22,000 a year.
Yeah.
He's like, quit complaining, quit acting like a worker. One day you're going to be an owner and, I expect you're going to lead this company one day with that kind of attitude. Maybe not those words specifically.
Right. He could see things in you.
Yeah. He think like a leader. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if he were still here, what he would have done, but I'm honored that I was invited. And I think it's because I love people. If you love people and you respect people and you strive to live with humility, which is a daily challenge for me, but to be humble about the work, recognizing that it's not you who's getting it done, right? God is working through you to get it done. So it was just a real privilege of mine.
That's cool.
And one of the funnest times of my life was to be the CEO of the Dwyer Group that then became Neighborly, which today is the world's largest home service provider.
Is it really? In the world?
In the world. Not just franchised
That
home
is
service
amazing.
provider, but the largest provider of home services in the world.
That is amazing. Now, did the name change after you were there, or did you help with that name change?
I was part of that name change.
You were part of the name
Very
change.
supportive. In fact, I had a different name that I had brought to Mike Bidwell. I had promoted Mike Bidwell the CEO at the time, but I had a different name that I had suggested. But we actually did the right thing by hiring an outside agency to really help us think about what resonates with the consumer.
It's spot on.
It is.
It's a great name.
It is.
Do you ever miss when you drive by? Do you ever missing?
I pray for them daily. So when I drive by, it's always a prayer.
Okay,
right?
good. Yeah,
Help Neighborly continue to do God's
good.
will and helping people live with values as they grow their businesses and their families. So that's the daily prayer. I do miss the people. So I will say I miss the people.
Yeah.
And I love doing deals. I'm somebody who enjoyed, doing deals that were a win-win-win for everybody. That was a lot of fun for me. So I do miss that a bit as well.
Because y'all had to touch so many different aspects of those deals because you're bringing in franchisees. You got to find the franchise or start the franchise companies within there because y'all got up to, 20 plus?
There's 28 businesses altogether now, I believe.
Okay. Yeah.
It could be changing today. I have no idea.
They won tomorrow. Who knows?
Yeah, I believe the last time I checked, 18 of those were franchised.
Okay, our franchise.
Because some of them are company-owned operations.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's great.
It's a beautiful, and the people are just wonderful.
Dina, when back in the 80s, when your dad is 81, he started it. Around 82, 83, he built that, became the offices where you officed.
Actually, a little later than that. Yeah.
Was it,
we were based on 18th Street in the early 80s, and then it was probably mid 80s
Mid
that he built
80s.
the Riverview, and then the Rainbow Building.
You know, I tell this story, I've told to your brothers, but Dad was mayor of Waco. And Don asked him to come do a ribbon cutting of that building.
We have the picture.
And I was in high school, so I go up there and we go up those stairs and of course past the plaques with the values on them and all that. It's really for a young high school kid. I was like, wow, this is something else. And seeing all those, what did he call them? Code of values. Was it code of values?
He did call them the code of values, and that was his original. We call it a belief system, but that's what he started the company.
He started with that. And they had him up on the wall, but we go up those stairs and I'll never forget. Of course, I'm a young guy and he's very polite to me and he knows my dad. And so I'll never forget, he took me to this office and that office was huge. In my mind, that office was huge.
It was huge.
Big old conference table, huge desk. And I'll never forget, I was probably kind of wide-eyed. And he said, look at this. And he walked over to his desk and he pushed a button. And am I right? The curtains opened automatically. And I looked at my dad. I was like, your office is nothing. I was like, this guy's got it going on. But I mean, it's funny how people like that leave an impression for a young man of just because he was humble. I mean, he didn't treat me kindly and stuff. And so that's just a funny little story. I remember how you view things when you're young.
Isn't that amazing?
And I think he said he had money green carpet too.
He did.
I think he
did.
But your dad had a little bit of that bigger than life personality to him.
Yes.
Right. But I said something to you earlier and you can comment on this, and you weren't looking for it, but I just said there's something about the Dwyer families, having known at least a little bit, each of them, there's a modesty about your family that seems to transcend through each child, who are all adults now, obviously, and probably through some of the kids now. I don't know them, but what is it about that? Because I think with great success, financial success, visible success, that can really go to people's heads. I mean, you can acquire more and more things and all that kind of stuff. Speak to that, because I think you are pretty modest people.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It comes back to that word humility, which is a daily thing that we have to work on. Yeah. But when you said you walked up the stairs and you saw the values on the wall, I will say that the values had a lot to do with that.
Yeah.
Our values were things that the original values, things like we must re-earn our position every day in every way. So he would say to us, and as his kids, he was harder on us than anybody else in the company. Yeah. I don't care what you did yesterday. What are you going to do today to make a difference in the lives of the franchisees and the employees and the customers? That's what I care about.
Wow.
So every day we had to say to ourselves, and as I became CEO, I would walk up those stairs, and that was the one value that just jumped out at me every day. But other values were we must count our blessings every day in every way. Mm-hmm. He taught us that. I mean, that was something that we reviewed on a regular basis as employees of the company, and in our case, children of his. We believe the untapped potential of every human being, every person we help achieve their potential fulfills our mission. It was all about others, Jay. I get emotional because it's beautiful.
It is.
Really beautiful.
It is beautiful. And two things about that. One, that your dad, those things came to his mind. He didn't chat GPT that and come up with something. He didn't just steal it from Paul Meyer and SMI or something.
No.
He all of his experiences led to that moment.
That's right.
To sit down and probably write it out by hand. But I think what's remarkable is that he didn't leave it at the workplace. And that is what's often lacking, is that people do things in the workplace, but they go home and don't bring those same...
And kick the dog. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, and so for y'all, it's like, he wasn't perfect. He was just a person,
None of us are.
Right. Yeah. But you saw that he's trying to tie together the totality of everything, the wholeness, and not just work and then personal life. It's all together. So that's pretty cool.
So that created a foundation for us.
Yeah.
That has stuck with us. And you attended one of our junior investment team meetings.
Yes.
Thank you for that. So now we have our children, my mother and father's grandchildren, now involved in, we want them to lead with that legacy. So we are purposefully trying to make sure that we indoctrinate, their grandpa's values and grandmother's values.
Yes. And by the way, well, your mother passed just a month,
6 weeks ago.
6 weeks ago at the age of
90.
She was 90.
She lived, and he died at 60. So
yeah,
okay, I'm going to suck it up now.
She's been a widow for 30 years.
Yes, she has.
But right by your side.
Oh gosh, yeah, right by our side, physically,
literally down the street,
and literally,
yeah, that's great. Yeah.
So, we took
way.
his original values because I told you he died at the age of 60 of a sudden heart attack.
Yeah,
a real surprise because it looked like a epitome of fitness, really. He took good care of himself once he realized he was a diabetic, and quickly cleaned that up and ate better and exercised. But when he died, we said the one thing we got to get right to keep this company alive for generations to come is we've got to keep the values front and center.
Yeah.
But he was no longer there to hold us accountable to those original beliefs, right? Because they were really not measurable, Jay. It was hard to measure loyalty, because one was loyalty as meaning to our lives.
Defining the word. Over the ages, people warp the definition of these words. And so you have to always kind of redefine, not new definitions, but restate it.
Right.
What is loyalty? Yep.
So what we did is we created what we call the operationalized code of values. And it goes by the theme of Live Rich, which your son, Jared, he actually made a song for us called Living Rich and having fun, loving life and everyone, chasing dreams and never giving in. I mean, Jared did such a perfect job.
He sang it at that conference in Dallas.
A big convention that we had, Jared, and we had 30 kids on the stage with us.
Oh, yeah.
We had Camp Peace and Plenty, and we taught the kids that song.
We should have brought him in on the screen, have him sing it for us.
That would have been cool. Anyways, with those values, the one thing that we also knew is that we didn't want them to die with the next CEO or even the CEO leaving and somebody else coming in. So we said, what a great franchise company does is they take the things that are good, right, that make the company successful, and they systematize them. So we took our code of values, the Live Rich values, and created a system around them. So we had to gamify it initially. So when we first introduced it in 1996 or so to our 125 employees at the time, we said, look, we've come up with these operationalized code of values. We as leaders have not demonstrated our commitment to these because they're new to us too. So employees were asking you, study these values. We put them on a laminated card.
Yep.
One side had the operationalized code of values. One side had the original code of values. So we would never forget that original code of values that Don Dwyer founded the company on. But we said, anytime you catch one of our executives violating a value, just give us a verbal beep. So it was really silly, but very simple. I like simple.
Literally
a beep.
A beep.
So you'd be walking down the hall and this happened. Somebody might use profanity. One of our operationalized values is to speak calmly and respectfully without profanity or sarcasm. So let's say one of the executives used profanity and an employee would say beep, and then the executive hopefully wouldn't go, oh, shh. And,
exactly.
say another bad word.
A lot of beeping going on.
Instead go, oh, okay. There was a ton of beeping going on. The Roadrunner, you remember the Roadrunner?
Yeah, it was like the Roadrunner.
Beep, 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 beep. Yep. We were being beeped for 90 days. Brought the team back together, said, what do you think? They said, we love it. We think they're measurable and we can hold ourselves accountable and hold one another accountable. They added one, though, that became our toughest value, and that was to never say anything about anyone that we would not say to him or her.
Wow.
So gossip, how gossip just kills people's hearts, their reputations, kills the community you're in. So that was one the employees suggested we add. It's one of the toughest ones I think that we have. It is. And then
because
the final,
in a workplace, you feel like there's this need sometime to say, well, we got to talk about Dina. Let's just go talk about it. We don't call it gossip, but in reality, a lot of times it is.
Yeah.
And
there are sometimes you do have to have those discussions and they're factual
you're
trying to make them as fact-based as you can, but there's a fine line there.
There is very much.
And we invite our employees and ourselves to bring that person in the room. If it's a situation that, you don't have to get the attorneys involved and all of that initially, but have that conversation, with that person. It's hard. None of us are perfect, but it's hard. But then we had to also measure how we were living up to the values. So we began to survey our franchisees and our employees on a regular basis. And it may just be, net promoter score. How are we doing living the values? Rate us on a scale of 1 to 10. Or it might be that we pick a few of the values when we would do our annual surveys and say, how are we doing on these values? And then pick the one that we get the worst score on and just commit to getting better at that one, because you can only work on so much at one time is what I found.
Right. And there's a ripple effect.
There is.
If you get stronger in one area, it tends to impact all the other traits and virtues, whatever they are.
But like you said, this is why I think the organization and the people who've been part of the organization have grown to be very humble people, or working to be humble people, because I think you can't just do these well at work, especially when you're reviewing them day in. Anytime a meeting of 3 or more was the system we created, we would review the values. Yeah. So it's like saying a prayer before a meeting in a secular environment. We would sit down and we would start by reviewing the values. Sometimes we'd pick the one value that this meeting had to do with. We're getting customer complaints. How do we get better at this? But that repetition, right? And then holding each other accountable. And I loved it when I'd get a call from a franchisee who had a problem. When they would say, Dina, I've got a problem. And I think these are the two values that tie closely with this problem.
Oh, they would speak those back. They would
speak them to me
and put it in real life.
and I would just say, thank you for calling me.
Wow.
Let's work through this. Or they would hold themselves accountable. I realized I'm the one who created this problem. That's a beautiful thing, Jay.
It is so. And to get that embedded in a culture. I mean, I was just with a group earlier talking about humble, hungry, and smart. It's off the shelf. Patrick Lencioni. It's all true. We should be humble, hungry, and smart. Getting it embedded in a culture, a training, a talk, doesn't do it. It literally has to be a part of that every day, as we like to say, a behavior, a habit that we've done. A friend of mine was interviewing. He was already working for y'all. He was going to interview for a different franchise. What do you call it?
Brand.
Brand. For a different role. And I'm missing the guy's name. Anyway, he was interviewing my friend. And in the interview, he asked him to recite a couple of the values. And he couldn't, or he stumbled. And I think he said, hey, we will meet again, but this part of this interview is over for now. So come back next week, but be ready to answer my questions. And my friend was just blown away, not in a bad way.
Right. Just
he saw the gravity of it. Like they're living, like this is for real. And he might have been perfect for the job. Right. All the skills, the guy may even wanted to have hired him, but that wasn't the point. The point was you need to fit in our culture. And I need to know you believe this. So that to me was for me, that moment of hearing that story, I was like, this is not a plaque on a wall. This is not a book. It's not a song.
Not just values on the website to look good for potential franchisees.
Yeah. Which is very common.
It is.
In that. Because it's a lot of work. It
is a lot of work. And the leadership, the CEO of the company has got to be the one that makes sure it happens.
Yes.
So we did invite our employees to recite the Code of Values by heart with heart. It wasn't just a recital. It was an internalization. Yeah. As you might do with scripture, right? Yeah. It's not just memorizing scripture. So I can just
say it,
spill off the scripture. It's about internalizing that scripture.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with the values. It's like, and people really pushed back on me when I said, this is what I want to have happen. I want people to internalize these. I want you to memorize them. And they're like, well, that's silly. And there's a lot of them. And I said, just do it. And then come back to me and tell me what you think. And I can't tell you, 9 out of 10 said to me, that was the greatest exercise for me because it forced me to get to really know and understand the values. And like you said, the words matter. So if we say respect is one of our values, but we don't define what we mean by respect, you know what? You got people of all ages working at the company.
Oh, yeah.
And they're going to define it in very different ways. And so we have to be very clear. And I had young employees, people would pick on the Generation Y or Generation X. And I said, look, they are hungry to know what you expect. And when you give them a set of values that this is who we are, it provides meaning to their lives.
It does.
And it doesn't just help them at work. It goes home with them. We had employees who created their own values with their families. And this is when my heart gets really happy because it's touching generations to come.
It does. Yeah, it does. In fact, a guy was sitting in your seat yesterday or 2 days ago, and they have the Perkins family values. Now, it has nothing to do with Dwyer, but I think to your point, he picked that up somewhere. This idea of and it's on their wall at their house, and it's things that are important to them. And I think more and more people are doing that. And I think you're right about the young generation. They do get a bad rap, but they do respond to those expectations. Mm-hmm. Our generation sometimes isn't giving it to them, or we're making assumptions. Instead of saying, here's what we believe, that's not tied to a generation. It's tied to timeless truth.
Right.
That's the key, right? It can't just be because it as though it's tied to a generation.
Yeah.
Or something I heard yesterday. It's timeless truths.
Right.
That's what those words are. When you think about moving forward, so you're not running a company, you're running your grandkids. You're with them a lot. That's good. Of course, my grandson and your granddaughter were buddies at Mother's Day out, which is fun. Della, is that right? Yeah, Della and Jack.
Right. Uh-huh.
I think you and I said, can we just go ahead and do an arranged marriage now?
Yeah,
so
they don't have to go through that.
But they like each other. We don't believe in it, but they like each other. They're friends. No. So when you think about though, I think of the fourth quarter of life a lot. You and I are both right on the cusp of the fourth quarter. And I've often heard people say that is some of the richest kind of significant years of our life. It's hard to picture that sometimes because you and I have both experienced wonderful things in the past, So when you think about the fourth quarter, your mindset about it, even some of these carrying on some of these values, what do you think that looks like for you moving into the fourth quarter of life?
Yeah, what just came into my mind, and I am clearly in the fourth quarter.
Well, I'm in denial. I'm
You're
59
younger.
this summer.
You're younger.
You
I'm
got me by a
62.
couple of years, okay?
But I'm still a CEO, but I like to think of myself as a chief evangelizing officer instead of a chief executive officer. And not that it has to be chief at all. It's just that my responsibility with the grandkids, right, is to make sure that I am teaching them about our Lord and living my life in a way that they say, oh, so Lula is my grandma name. Lula, So Lula doesn't just say it, she lives it, right? So it's setting an example for them. But outside of my family, just whomever I'm spending time with. I told you I was at a private equity conference a week and a half ago. I want to make sure that I'm living my faith in the experiences that I'm having with each and every person that I meet. And you taught me something a long time ago, Jay. One of the first times you came to the office when it was like, our dads were not the ones dealing together anymore. It was us dealing together and doing business together. And the importance of really seeing the people that are in front of you. In our case, we hug, right? Not everybody's comfortable with a hug, but in our case, it's giving that genuine hug and stopping whatever it is you're doing. Because I was always busy sitting at my desk. But you taught me, get away from your desk, come around and greet the person who you're going to be spending time with. And that's something I'll never forget. But that's today, the way that we treat other people says a lot about who we are. And if they know we're Christian, then they say, wow, so that's a Christian that I want to learn more about Christianity in the case, because they're setting an example.
Your kids are going to see it more than they hear it.
Yeah.
Your grandkids.
Oh, yeah.
Like your grandkids.
They watch everything we do.
They don't miss it. I mean, they don't miss anything. I told my granddaughter, she's 8. When she was 7, I said, I'm not going to drink any more Diet Coke. I'm going to got to lose some weight. No more Diet Coke. A month later, I'm drinking a Diet Coke. And she's like, Bebop, what are you drinking in that cup? I'm like, leave me alone. I was like, they see everything. All our warts, the good and the bad.
It's good to tell them, though, because it holds you accountable.
Well, they do. And so if they see that, they do see our character.
Everything.
Our how we love our spouses, how we treat issues in the world.
How we talk about people who are driving in front of us when we're in the car with them and they're in the car seats.
Yeah,
really, our reactions.
They see it.
So if they hear us praying for those people instead of hollering, and of course I wouldn't use profanity, but shouting something not nice, they do. They watch everything.
So when you think about that fourth quarter, do you get, is the family component, maybe being involved, the private equity stuff? Is there anything new in your life that you're thinking, I really want to take all this who I am and drive it in? Is there anything new on the horizon for you?
Not yet. One of the things I've been spending a lot of time on, so people say, how do you like retirement? It's like, I don't like the word retirement, so I don't even say I'm retired. I'm in the refinement phase. So I think God's really refining me, and he hasn't shown me, what the next thing is, because I've been spending a lot of time with my husband, Mike. I'm so grateful that we have this wonderful journey that we're on. We go on a lot of spiritual pilgrimages. In fact, I was just
in Italy,
in Rome.
Yeah.
And not just Rome, but other parts of Italy in March, and again back in January with a group of students from Bishop Louis Riker. But we do different retreats, marriage retreats. We'll do pilgrimages to France. It's just to enhance our walk with the Lord. Yeah. But that's the way we like to do it, and literally walk. Like we've done the Camino de Santiago, which you basically walk 75, 80 miles. Wow. And you're just praying and getting closer to the Lord along the way in your own time, So that's something that, again, God's been refining me the last 5 years. And so I don't know. I don't know what the future holds.
I like refinement versus retirement.
I did. Retirement's not me.
Some people say it's not wrong to retire from a job, but retirement itself of stopping.
Right.
To retire from life.
Right.
We can't do that. So we got to figure out, we have to refine and figure that out. And I think to your point, someone might say, I can't afford to go to France. But just to remind people, like taking a walk by the river with your spouse or your best friend or by yourself as you pray and think about life, we've got to find those moments.
You can do little pilgrimages. Yes, just getting into a classroom of silence.
Yeah. And turn off TV, turn off stuff and do those things in that. When earlier I'd mentioned to you this question about what is your version of success? Most of my life, that question was always asked, what is success? It always seemed like there was no other answer than to say, build a business, save money, be able to do this, pay off my house. Those were always the generic answers, which really don't have a lot of life to them, and they're all in a box. So what's your version of success?
That's funny you ask that, because my mind goes way back to the cassette tapes I listened to at 11, because Paul Meyer defined it as the progressive realization of worthwhile predetermined personal goals. Okay. So that's what I was trained on.
Yeah.
But today I've had it, just like you probably, I've had a mission statement that subconsciously I say to myself day in and day out, and that's to do what's good and right in God's eyes, to be the best that I can be, to love people and help them and not hurt them. So when I'm doing that, then that's success.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's very different than maybe, like you said, I want the dream house, or I want the condo on the beach, and there's nothing wrong with it. I still teach a class called Design Your Life, but it's shifting a little bit in how I teach it. It's what's God's design for your life, and are you listening to what God's asking you to do for your life? This weekend I'm on the National Board of Young Catholic Professionals. So I am still doing a lot more than I think I remember I'm doing. My husband's like, you're always busy.
Your schedule's more busy than you think it is.
Yeah, so I'm heading up on Thursday night, actually, and I'll be spending 2.5 days with this wonderful group of young people, 700 young people who are just wanting to keep their faith in the workplace. Yeah. So we're being very intentional about it, but I've taught them Design Your Life multiple times now, and just, again, helping them focus and then keeping their faith in the workplace.
Before I forget, because that reminds me, Design Your Life, tell us about that. But also, you mentioned some resources.
Yes.
On the web. So tell us about that.
Yeah. In fact, Design Your Life is something, because I've been invited to do that a lot for organizations, and because I'm not speaking nearly as much, I've purposely said I'm going to slow down for a while. I may pick that up again, but I've got an online version of Design Your Life too, and it's available at a small price, but the whole thing's online, and people can watch it as many times as they want. All the worksheets go with it. So if they go to DinaDwyer-Owens.com, that's on my website. But the thing I'd like to share is that there's a Create Your Culture workbook that's free to anybody who's interested. And if they're thinking about creating values for their businesses, their churches, their organizations, and being very clear, that workbook will help them think through it. It's pretty simple. The steps are pretty simple, but it's not easy. Yeah. It takes a lot of thought, and you really have to have your core team completely engaged in those values and committed to those values, or it's never going to work. Sure. Right. You've got to be, number one, engaged, but if they're not bought into it, it's not going to work. Right. And then I have a simple worksheet I just did with a group of high school students last week called Your Better Future. The question was, does anybody not want to have a better future? Because these kids, you got to wake them up.
Yeah. What? It's like, okay, what? How did you answer? How do I answer that question?
Of course I want to have a better future.
Of course I want to have,
So it's a very simple, probably 10 questions that have to do with the areas of life that most of us, spend our time in, from physical to spiritual to financial. And it's just, what's the one thing I could do better in this area of my life? And again, we're not going to tackle 10 of those, Jay, at one time, but the idea is think about it and then just pick one or two that you're going to work on. So it's a different form of goal setting. It's much more simplified. It may just be creating a new habit.
Right. Yeah. A lot of people who design goal setting are very, they have a certain personality and kind of way they do it, and they all kind of mimic each other. And I think creating for the different mindsets of people, the different just styles of how we learn and how we hold ourselves accountable. For some people, it is, I need one or two simple things.
That's right.
I don't need an Excel spreadsheet that I color coded, so I'm sure there's some aspects of that. So that's really good. DinaDwyer-Owens.com.
Yes.
The whole name. And we'll put that on the screen in that. It's interesting how little things, I just was thinking about this story earlier when you talk about your dad giving you those tapes. There was what's called an MDRT conference, $1 Million Roundtable, an insurance deal. And I would go to those, and they had these speakers. And there was a guy that spoke, and he had a book called Attitude is Everything. And I bought the book, and he had a cassette tape of his talk. So I brought it back. Jared was about 6 or so. And I don't know if he found the tape. I don't really know, but I know he listened to it. And one day I was leaving for work. He was putting on his shoes for school. And I said, "Hey son, I love you. Heading out to work. Have a good day." And he looks up at me and he says, "You too, Dad." And he goes, "And remember, attitude is everything. So go out and make it a super fantastic day." And I just thought to myself, I got a little motivational speaker right here. But it goes back to that simplicity of going, we have to share values, principles, truths, not one time, but to live them and put it in front of them. Yeah. Whether it's the music they listen to, the books they read, the speakers they hear, obviously in their faith and their relationship to the Lord. I mean, I think parents need to be reminded of that all the time, because unlike when we were young, the competition for our grandkids' generation, for their mind and what they read and hear, it is overwhelming.
It is overwhelming.
And so I think as grandparents, as parents, aunts and uncles, friends, continue to do that and give them that vision for success. Sometimes people will say, well, my parents did this, so this is my vision. We were talking about your kids and my kids, and that they're not necessarily following in our footsteps in careers or paths we took. But that's okay. My dad would say that life, when you think of a tree, there are the roots and there are the branches. Some parents focus too much on wanting their kids' branches to look like theirs. Right. Instead of saying, no, you want their roots to be deep. Their branches are going to look a little different.
That's right.
And I feel like you've, as a parent of adult children, as someone who's led thousands of people, you were probably very comfortable going, the branches are all going to look a little different, but you were trying to build in the roots, the values, respect, integrity, right? I mean, that's what you wanted. And whether people stayed at the Dwyer Group or took another job or different things, that wasn't the important part.
That's right.
Right. In that. So I appreciate
it.
By the way,
go deep. Yeah.
You said respect, integrity, customer
focus, and having fun in the process.
Having fun in the process. That's what it was.
Yeah.
Do you still have that book? Is it out?
I mean, yeah. That's on the website as well. So Live Rich.
Have you written one since then?
Yes, it's Values Inc. So I wrote the first book primarily because we were growing so fast as a company that the question I had to the employees was, how do we help all these new employees and these new franchisees become indoctrinated quicker into our code of values? And one of the staff accountants said, how about we write a storybook? People really love stories.
Yeah.
So the first book's a very short paperback. You can read it in less than 2 hours, and it's called Live Rich. So it tells lots of stories about each of the values and how I had experiences with those values and other people had experiences with those values. And then, I'd go on the speaking circuit. People invite me to come speak about the values. And then, some of the CEOs would say, yeah, that's just kind of fuzzy, warm and fuzzy stuff that doesn't really translate into financial success for a business. And I said, I hate to say you're wrong, but you're wrong.
You're wrong.
And so I wrote a book called Values Inc.
Okay.
And Values Inc. was geared towards more of that corporate mindset of people who don't believe that values translate into financial success. So that was written for that purpose.
Yep. That's good. That's good. It reminds me, there's a book out, I think, Value-Based Investing. So you're seeing that word more.
Yeah.
I think people have gotten over that hurdle that person mentioned.
Right.
It doesn't translate. So no, it does.
It does translate.
So before we go, I always like to ask people, and by the way, in this podcast, we try to talk about behaviors and attitudes. With you, it's a compliment to you. I don't have to specifically ask the question about your behaviors and attitudes because you exude those things anyway. It's a part of who you are. So you exude a positive attitude. I could fill in a lot of different words besides positive, but it's clear from a child up until now, the behaviors and what you do daily is a big part of that, and then passing that on. So thank you I didn't have to ask because it's a part of who you are. But when you think about, if you get up every day and you were to open a playbook and you saw one word, and this may not be true for your whole life, but in this season of your life, what is the word you want to look at? What is that word for you?
And I'm full of words, so one word's hard for me, but be not afraid is what comes to mind, because no matter what it is that I'm facing, first of all, I get up and I count my blessings.
Yeah.
But whatever it is I'm facing, it's be not afraid. If that means I'm going to go do something different today, that's going to be challenging and adventurous for me, be not afraid. Or if that's going to be,
I like that.
I need to have a tough conversation with somebody I love, be not afraid, because in the Bible, 300 something times, I think be not afraid is mentioned.
Afraid. Yeah.
So that's the thing that came to mind whenever you kind of pose that question.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. What is that word? And I like that. You're the second person when I say, give me one word, they give me more than one word, but that's okay. No, my word is resilient. And I don't know why, it's just been on my mind. I just in thinking about life, and maybe it's our age. I don't know, that we've had to be resilient in things. So then it kind of gets as a part of who we are. And it's interesting how that word will change at times, over time. Your dad lived to 60, so he didn't see the older years. My dad, like your mom, lived to 90. So I got to watch him be courageous, be without fear, be strong and courageous, and to finish well at an old age, just like you got your.
Yeah.
I mean, your mother, I'm sure went through challenges, but she was
heart,
resilient. Her heart,
love is really the word. I guess if I did come up with the word, it would be love.
Love, yeah, and she modeled that well.
She did, and the definition I think that she would share, and that I do share today, in fact, is I think St. Thomas Aquinas coined this, and that is to will the good of the other. So to love is to will the good of the other.
Yeah.
So we love it. We're to love everybody, right?
Yeah.
We want what's good for everybody. Sometimes that means a tough conversation.
It does.
And my mother was really good about that. Like the time I came in wearing something that I wouldn't normally wear to work, thinking, I'm going to just step out of my comfort zone and wear something different, very colorful. And she looks at me up and down and she goes, you're not wearing that, are you?
You're not wearing that, are you?
That was love, because like my daughter,
love.
she knew that was not fitting for me. And
yes.
She said, she should probably go home and change.
Yeah, I would change that, Mom. Just a suggestion, but hey, thank you. I mean, how could we end any better than a quote from Thomas Aquinas? So that's wonderful, and thank you for your friendship. Thank you for being able to know you in business and life. And while we don't see each other socially out, whenever I see you, it's a hug. It's a how are you? How's Mike? How's Lydia? And so just thank you for that, and that you're living this through your kids and grandkids, and so.
Yep.
Be
Thank
fun.
you, Jay.
We'll talk again in 20 years, see what happens.
Yeah, that's right.
On the show. Thank you.
God bless.
It was fun. Your Playbook is powered by Sandler, a global provider of sales and leadership methodology backed by data-driven solutions designed for measurable, continued success. Check out Sandler.com. And a big shout out to Rogue Media Network.
This has been a Rogue Media Network production.